Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second workshop in our second round of the Omni Risk Return Industry Workshops. If you're connected to VPN, please disconnect as it sometimes affects the sound, so you'll struggle to hear us. Please disconnect. If that doesn't work, please exit and join us again. My name is Atul Mpanje. I'm a communications officer at the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, and I'll be guiding you through today's session. Thank you very much for joining us as we explore sections 5 to 8 of the return, a critical part of building a smarter, more practical approach to regulatory reporting. I'm joined today by some of my colleagues. I'm going to ask them to switch on their cameras when I mention their names. We have Lorraine van Deventer. We have Marilee Victor, Juanita Smith, and Akashin Rampasar. Thank you for switching on your cameras, colleagues. As a reminder to everyone, we've published several key documents to support this process. So we have the FSCA Communications 19 of 2025. We have the explanatory memorandum and the draft Omni Risk Return template itself. It's all available on the FSCA website. So if you haven't reviewed them, we encourage you to do so. We've also uploaded the slides, these slides for all the workshops on our website. So under the same folder where you look for the explanatory memorandum and FSCA Communication 19 or 2025, that's where you will find the slides. So here's how this afternoon will unfold. We're going to be together from 1 o'clock, which is now, until 3 p.m. We will have a presentation done by Lorraine van Deventer, who will then be joined by Juanita Smith. But before that, we have opening remarks by Marilee Victor, okay? So once Lorraine and Juanita has spoken, we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please drop them on the Q&A tab at the top of your screen and we'll address them. Alternatively, you can write your question down, keep it, and raise your hand when we reach the Q&A segment. Thank you very much. Marilee, please come through with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Atule. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. If you did join our first webinar of this second round, you would have seen the same slide. So if you want to make a quick coffee, that's fine, but we do feel it's important to again point out these remarks as some new attendees are joining today. This really sets the scene and gives some context to this risk return, which we hope will help you understand it better. Firstly, Lorraine is going to go through the second part of the risk return today in detail to explain why we're asking certain questions. And the questions we ask obviously speak to the risks that we're trying to identify. So what we're asking of you at this point is look at the contents of the return, look at the questions that we ask. Is it possible for you to answer? Is there a potential way that we could ask it differently that would suit your sector better? There will be certain functionalities that will be written into this risk return later on. For example, some questions may be grayed out if not applicable to you, but that isn't currently in the risk return. So what we ask is have a look at the questions so that you can really comment on whether you're able to answer those or not. Very important, this return is but one of the tools that we use to supervise our entities. Be it a very important one, but what it does, it's supposed to give us a high-level risk rating of all the entities across our sector by asking the same questions to all those entities. That doesn't mean that's the only type of or the only tool that we will use to risk rate you. Obviously, there will be other engagements, for example, on-site visits or even information requests. And all of those tools are used together to understand our entities, our sectors better. Not only the specific sectors that we supervise or the specific entities on their own, but also that we're eventually in a position to be able to do reporting and understanding of our financial sectors across the board so that we can do consolidated reporting when we look at all our sectors together. So the Omni risk return is basically replacing the Omni CBR. So we had questions before. The Omni CBR is not going to be rolled out as we published it about 2 years ago. Please note that The other reporting that we are already requesting from entities at this point, some examples would be the financial reporting for the FSPs, and also the conduct of business return for insurers. You will still be asked to continue with the reporting on those documents, as they do ask different questions and they point on different risk indicators for us. Note in the background, we are going through a process of streamlining those reports as well. And in future, there may be changes to those reports. We may even combine some of them to make sure that we don't duplicate reporting. It's all part of a very big process that we've undertaken. If you are currently not getting some of the information that we're asking, I think it is quite important that you think about why you are not getting it and if you really don't need to obtain that information. Because I think we went through a very detailed process of making sure what we think is relevant for an entity to be able to understand the risk of their customers. So we've included, and I think if you remember and you recall the Omni CBR, it was quite a big document with many questions. We've reduced that quite a bit in the form of the Omni risk return. So we feel that these really are very important questions and the information that we will need and use. So even if you don't get the information at this point, look at towards obtaining it in future, in finding ways of obtaining it so that you can report on it in future. But again, please feel free to comment on some requests that we make if you really feel that the information that we're asking isn't something that you can obtain for some reason, or if you think that it's not relevant. We will not leave you after these webinars. We understand that this is still a long road that we're going to walk with you, and the different next sectors will need different guidance. I almost want to say strategies. So smaller FSPs may require a bit more detailed engagements on the matter, even if it comes to completing the document. For bigger entities, it may be different. I think that's where I have to emphasize the pilot phase, which we will enter into next year. It is very important that we have entities taking place of all sizes, forms, business models, so that we can understand whether it is possible and how easy or difficult it is and practical it is for all entities to complete this return. In saying that, not only size plays a role, but also the type of risk that you play. And we are aware that currently we're asking all supervised entities to complete, but we know that some entities are very low risk. The practicality of those entities reporting, we also want to test via the pilot phase. And then very lastly, I just want to point out that I do think it's very important that you take the time to read through all the documents and to watch the information that we publish. It all tells a story. And if you miss something that may lead to questions that we easily answered for you in some of the documents that we have issued. With that, I hand back over to Atuli. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those opening remarks, Marilee. Victor. Lorraine, may you please come through with your presentation, and then you can hand over straight to Juanita when you're done.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to join today. It's great to see such a great attendance. So I will be taking you through the sections of the Omni risk return we are focusing on today, and I'll give you a quick overview of why we are asking for this information and how it connects to our broader supervisory work. So as I go through my part of the presentation, I know many of you might think that we're asking for quite a lot of data and that all of this just adds to your compliance burden. It is important to remember that the information that we are requesting isn't just for regulatory purposes. It is, but at the same time, it can also give you some real insights into your own business, your customers that you're dealing with, and your activities and even your risks. Especially because it is something that if it's not something that you currently track in a structured manner. So using this data, like I said, will help you get a clearer, more consistent view of your risks. And it will also could assist you in your reporting to your internal governance structures. So this slide is just to give you a view of the overall structure of the risk return. As you can see, it's divided into 12 sections, each focusing on a different part of an institution's operations and risk profile, ranging from governance all the way down to financial data. So for today's workshop, we will be focusing on section 5 to 8, which deal with customer assets, transaction activity, product terminations, and advertising and communication. So for those who joined yesterday's session, as you will note, the slide will look very familiar. Again, apologies for the repeat, but as Marilee mentioned, that not everyone in today's session necessarily attended yesterday's session. Therefore, some of the repeat in the content. Also, just before we start, a reminder that many of the data points that we request in the return serve multiple supervisory purposes, and the interpretation isn't always one-directional. So depending on the context, the same data can either increase or decrease an institution's risks. So it's not just about the numbers themselves, but about what those numbers actually tell us in the bigger picture. So we'll start with section 5. So this section looks at the total value of customer assets that institutions hold or manage. So both at the start and the end of the reporting period, as well as the average value during that time. So the purpose here is just to help the FSCA understand the scale of an institution's fiduciary responsibility. In other words, how much customer value is under its care. The higher the value of assets, obviously, the greater the potential customer impact if those assets are either mismanaged, lost, or exposed to operational weaknesses. So we are also asking for the average values because it provides a more balanced view over time. Start and end figures tend to fluctuate, either due to market movements or once-off transactions, whilst averages smooths out those variations over time. So it just gives us a better sense of the typical level of assets managed during the reporting period. Also, as we start building up a bit of history with this data, we will use it to spot trends and changes over time. So, for example, if we see a drop in asset values, that could signal customer dissatisfaction or weak portfolio management. And then also to rule out specific market conditions, we will be using the data to benchmark against your peers. And this will also help tell us whether the drop is either something specific to that institution or a general trend across the market or sector. So this section focuses on how institutions collect or receive money from customers, either directly or through third parties. So we have defined what we mean by collection. And as you can see from the definition, it's quite broad, intentionally so. It really covers any situation where funds are received or handled for customers, and it includes funds collected into the collector's own account before it being transferred, funds collected into a dedicated or segregated account that's managed by another entity, and situations where the collector merely facilitates the payment, even if they never actually hold or receive the money. In subsection A, we are asking institutions to tell us who collects the fund on their behalf and the value of those collections during the reporting period. So this really just helps us understand the flow of customer money. So where it enters the system, who handles it, and whether any foreign entities are involved. So we are asking institutions to break it down by different types of collectors, because each type carries a different level of risk and oversight responsibility and would therefore impact on your specific risk profile. In subsection C, we ask for the value of all money collected directly from customers. So, meaning payments made straight into the reporting institution's own accounts. And this will just help us identify what proportion of the collections are direct versus third party handled. So in subsection D, we ask for the total amount of collections, direct and third party collections combined, in other words. But this is, as far as I remember, this is a field that you won't have to complete. It will be calculated by the system automatically based on the values that you've provided in A and B. So it's just something for you to check against and make sure that the data that you've entered is correct and that it actually validates. In subsection E, we flip the focus. And here we look at outflows. So that, in other words, the total value of payments made by the financial institution to customers. And this could include claim payouts, withdrawals, redemptions, or maturity payments. So we haven't specified. So it's all payments made to customers during the reporting periods. I think what we will also see from here is that where you are an institution that heavily rely on third-party or cross-border collectors, there will be an expectation that you have stronger controls in place. For example, like reconciliation, segregation of client money, or enhanced oversight to ensure that funds reach the correct destination promptly and safely. So Section 5.3 focuses on how quickly and accurately institutions allocate customer assets after they have received them. So when we talk about allocations, we mean the process of assigning or applying the funds or assets that you've received from the customers to the correct accounts or products or purposes identified by the customer. So in other words, that you allocate those funds as instructed by the customer or as set out in the mandate or agreement entered into with the customer. So the allocation is only considered complete when the funds have been correctly and fully applied in line with those instructions. So therefore, we do not recognize partial completions for purposes of this part of the report. So in this section, we ask for two main data points. So the first is the number of fully completed allocations. That's and you have to break that down by how long it took from receipt of the funds until such time that you have fully allocated it in accordance to the instructions. And you'll see there are specific time categories in accordance which you need to classify the allocations. And then we also ask in B for the total number of transactions that required allocation during the reporting period. And this is just so that we can understand the proportion that were completed on time versus those delayed and those that actually are still unallocated. So the main purpose of this section is really to measure time to allocation, which help us assess whether the institutions are actually processing customer instructions promptly. These two sections, 5.4 and 5.5, focus on understanding where money is flowing from and to. And this is particularly when it involves border areas and metropolitan regions or high-risk jurisdictions. Both these sections apply only to accountable institutions supervised by the FECA for FIC Act compliance. eventually in the final version of the return, when you complete it on our system, these sections will be grayed out for those institutions who are not accountable institutions and who are not supervised by the FSCA. So section 5.4 looks at how funds move in and out of areas that may present heightened AML, CFT or risks. And institutions are asked to report the value of money received from and paid to customers residing near a national border, and the value of money received from and paid to customers residing within a metropolitan area. This distinction is important from an AML safety perspective, because border regions are often more vulnerable to cross-border movement of funds and potential illicit financial activity. So the last section, 5.5, here we focus on money flows involving foreign jurisdictions, and this is specifically your grey-listed and blacklisted countries. And here, institutions are required to report the total value of money received and paid to legal entities or natural persons in both grey-listed as well as blacklisted. And the reason why we're asking for this information, because it could signal, especially in cases where there are disproportionate or high volume flows, it may indicate increased AML CFT exposure and the need for enhanced transaction monitoring and stronger customer due diligence. So this section looks at unclaimed assets. That is financial products or funds that belong to customers but have not been claimed or accessed for a significant period of time. We have defined unclaimed assets, but I must emphasize that this definition is only for purposes of this return. And it's defined as either assets that have not been claimed or paid to the rightful owner within 24 months of becoming due or payable, or assets where there's been no activity, contact, or engagement from the customer 5 years. So that would include your dormant accounts. So institutions are here asked to report the number and the value of these unclaimed assets and broken down by how long they've remained unclaimed, from less than a year to more than 20 years. They must also provide the total number of customers with unclaimed assets and the total value of unclaimed assets at the end of the reporting period. And it must further be classified in accordance to assets that are legally due. In other words, those that became due, but they haven't been claimed within 24 months, and then those assets where there are no activity on the account. So we do acknowledge that that apart from the retirement funds industry, we don't yet have formal framework for unclaimed assets across the sector. As you are aware, we are in the process of working on a framework, and we've had some. We've published a discussion paper in terms of which we've invited comment. That work has not yet been finalized. So the definition here is really just a starting point for reporting purposes, and that is to enable us to get some level of understanding of unclaimed or dormant assets across the industry. And we really do encourage you to share comments or any suggestions to help ensure that this definition and how we've reflected here is practical and appropriate for purposes of reporting in terms of this return. So section 5.7 looks at transactions across higher risk or more complex product classes, as well as tracking cross-border or offshore fund flows. Again, this section only applies to accountable institutions, as these activities often carry inherent AML CFT risks. So here, in terms of this section, institutions must report both the number and value of transactions during the reporting period, broken down into several product types, as listed on the screen. We also have another category, and that other category really just captures other products or instruments that's not listed. And it really just helps us to determine the proportion of transactions conducted by the institution involving higher risk products compared to the other products the institution is dealing in. Under subsection C, institutions are also asked to provide the total value of transactions where funds were received from or paid to foreign jurisdictions, and the total value of transactions where funds were received from or paid to domestic sources. And that just also helps us to give a breakdown of the proportion of offshore versus local activity. I think this is the last subsection under section 5, and it deals with arrear retirement fund contributions, which refers to contributions that employers owe to retirement funds but have not yet paid over. So this is a section that will only be applicable to retirement funds and 13B administrators. So it will be grayed out for the other financial institutions. So the purpose here is just to measure how late those contributions are and to assess whether funds are being received on time, because persistent arrears can be a strong indicator of employer non-compliance or weak collection processes. So here institutions are asked to provide the value of contributions overdue across the different time bands as listed on the screen. And they also need to report the total value of those contributions received during the reporting period. And again, this breakdown allows us to distinguish between short-term temporary delays, which may happen due to administrative issues, and then longer-term or systemic arrears, which could really indicate serious compliance or financial distress on the part of the employer. So there is one question that does come up, and especially from the industry, and it says, we already report arrears every month, so why are we being asked to report this again? That is a fair question, and I think the key difference is that this section gives us an age analysis rather than just a monthly snapshot. So the monthly reports tell us when arrears occur, but they don't necessarily show whether they've been resolved or if they're piling up over time. So this aggregated age-based view really helps us track progress in addressing arrears. So whether the employers are catching up on missed payments and how long amounts actually remain outstanding. And like I said, this will identify patterns of chronic non-compliance. So moving to section 6. So the first part focus on, this whole section focuses on how institutions distribute their products and services and through which channels customers interact with them. So it's divided in two parts, 6.1 and 6.2. 6.1 must be completed by all financial institutions except market infrastructures and credit rating agencies, and 6.2 only applies to market infrastructures and credit rating agencies. So again, these sections the relevant sections will be grayed out depending on your authorization status. So in terms of section 6.1, institutions must indicate the number of transactions that took place during the reporting period, broken down by the type of distribution channel used. There are 7 specific distribution channels listed, plus one other category to capture really anything that's not captured anywhere else. Just to run quickly through the 7 channels, that's your telesales and call centers. So here we not only want to know the number of transactions conducted through this channel, but we also want you to break it down to reflect whether it's your own call center or a third party's call center. And where there's a third party's call center, we want to know whether that third party is your heuristic rep, an FSP, or any other type of third party. We then also look at own branch networks and sales forces. Again, we want you to break it down into your own reps, heuristic reps, and your employees and contractors. We look at retail outlets, funeral parlors, and also we want to know whether it's distributed by FSPs that are not already captured by any of the above listed specific categories. And this really just captures any FSP that sell or distribute your products. That's not part of a call center branch or retail channel. We then also want to know if you use internet-based platforms, and here we distinguish between sales with and without advice, and whether it's your own website or a third party's website. Then we look at mobile applications and then the catch-all. So that's the other. So that's for anything that's new or unique and that's not listed. So the reason why we ask for this breakdown is really just to help us understand the distribution landscape and to assess which channels are mostly used across the sector, the risk associated with some of these channels. So, for example, online and automated advice platforms will generally carry a higher conduct and technology risk than, for example, a retail outlet. And then we also assess any dependencies and concentration risks where a institution relies heavily, for example, on one channel, and it just helps to assess any potential continuity risks if that channel is ever disrupted for whatever reason. So section 6.1 essentially gave us a picture of your distribution risk. It shows us where and how customers are reached and where there might be any operational dependencies. So in section 6.2, like I said, which only applies to the markets and credit rating agencies, you will see that here the focus shifts from distribution to actual transactions, given the nature of the businesses. So for market infrastructures, we ask for both the number and total value of transactions that were processed, cleared, or settled during the reporting period. And this really just helps us understand the scale of the operations and the risk associated therewith. Whilst for credit rating agencies, we ask for the number of ratings issued, declined, or changed. And this just helps us gauge the activity levels and then the operational scope of each agency. And it also will assist in assessing whether spikes in volume or frequent rating changes, which may point to capacity or some concerns and how they apply the assessment. Or conduct the assessment rather. Section 6.3, in terms of this section, we focus on understanding the composition and the structure of your distribution network. So in other words, who's actually distributing your products and services on behalf of the institution and how that network is structured. The goal really is to give us visibility into the size and the nature and the potential risks within each institution's distribution channel. It will also highlight any dependencies, conflicts of interest, or additional governance oversight that may be required. So under A, we require you to provide the total number of independent intermediaries that you use. We have defined it for purposes of this return, and it means anyone who is not employed by, have no direct affiliation or dependency on single institutions, and does not exclusively intermediate for any one financial institution. We then also ask for a breakdown into FSPs, representatives of FSPs, and other intermediaries that does not fit into any of those categories. And this just helps us understand how widely institutions rely on independent distribution networks And then under B, we look at your tied agencies. So these are individuals or entities that are employed or contracted to a specific institution and only sells and provides services in respect of the products of that institution. And this could be, anything from the employees, non-employee representatives contracted to it, or FSPs or others formally tied to that institution. So you are again, in terms of subparagraph C, you're not required to complete the overall total. The system will calculate it for you based on the numbers that you provided. So then finally, for credit rating agencies, we ask for the number of ratings that the institution has issued. For entities that are significant fee contributors. And when we refer to a significant fee contributor, we're talking about a rated entity or its related or affiliated entities that contributes 5% or more to the credit rating agency's total annual revenue, either through rating fees or any other related business arrangements. And this will just help us to identify whether there might be any concentration risk or potential conflicts of interest, which could compromise the independence or objectivity in a rating. So moving to section 7. In terms of 7.1, this section focuses on understanding the stability of your customers' relationships. It also points to the resilience of product offerings and suitability of products by considering product or service terminations. So A and B look at products or agreements that were terminated by the customer. So this tells us when clients themselves are choosing to walk away. And here, high termination rates may be a red flag for poor product design, inadequate disclosure, or aggressive sales tactics. In paragraph C, we zoom in on life and non-life insurance products and ask for a further breakdown. So whether the terminations that were listed in A and B was a lapse, a cancellation, a surrender, or a non-renewal. So each, obviously, of these carries different risk implications. And I think especially the institutions working in the insurance sector are well aware of the fact that a high lapse or surrender rates could point to perhaps affordability or suitability concerns, while non-renewals might reflect competitive pressure or customer disagreement. But like we said, they are just signals. And if we see this as a flag or a signal, the supervisors will engage further to determine the actual cause. In subsections D and E, these sections cover terminations initiated by the institution itself. So that's, for example, in cases where you withdraw a product or the institution decide to cancel the policies due to non-payment, or the relationship is ended because of compliance concerns. That's, for example, where a bank decide to close a bank account of a customer. So tracking these help us identify cases where institutions might be offboarding clients or products too aggressively, which could obviously also affect customer outcomes. Subsection F deals with trade cancellations. So here we distinguish between cancelled, suspended, or rejected failed trades. If these volumes are unusually high, it may point to operational weaknesses, poor order management, or unreliable systems, all of which increase conduct and market risk. And this section will only be relevant for market infrastructures. So it will be grayed out for the other institutions operating in other sectors. In G, we ask for data on suspended, delisted, and total listed securities. And finally, in H and I, We ask for the total number of products and agreements that are still in force at the end of the reporting period. And this just gives us a closing snapshot of the institution's active portfolio. And in J, we ask for the number of credit ratings that were withdrawn during the period. So those, maybe just to emphasize that those questions specifically relating to the market infrastructures and credit ratings will be disabled or grayed out for other institutions. Section 7.2 once again only apply to financial institutions that are accountable institutions. And in terms of this section, we are focusing specifically on early withdrawals from fixed-term investments. Essentially, that's when a client takes out funds before the expiry of the contract term. And here we're looking to identify patterns that may signal potential AML CFT risks or product misuse. So frequent or large premature withdrawals, especially soon after deposits, could indicate or signal that products are being used to move or conceal funds rather than for legitimate investment purposes, which obviously is a red flag from an AML CFT perspective. We look now moving to section 8. This is the last section that we will be covering during today's session. And this section looks at how institutions advertise their products and communicate with their customers, through which channels and how much they actually spend on advertising and whether any advertising materials had to be amended. So in 8.1, we focus on the advertising channels. Here, you are required to indicate all the channels that you've used during the reporting period, whether it's digital, traditional media, direct marketing, or any other alternative channels. These channels are further broken down. For example, under digital media, you must indicate whether you have made use of social media platforms, search engine, online ads, or email campaigns for advertising purposes. We then provide for an overall catch-all under the other. Again, if the institution has used a new or a unique channel that are not specified. So we will be using this information to really understand the range and the suitability of channels being used by our institutions. It will also contribute to the risk rating of an entity because some channels, particularly social media or influencer campaigns, can present higher conduct risks. In section 8.2, we want to know what was your advertising expenditure, so how much was actually spent on marketing. And when this is tracked over time, sudden spikes could indicate aggressive sales strategies or expansions, which in itself may increase the risk of mis-selling. And that's why it's a signal for us. And finally, in section 8.3, this section covers amendments to advertising materials, and it captures cases where adverts had to be corrected or withdrawn due to misleading or inaccurate information. And frequent amendments may signal weak internal review processes or poor oversight of marketing practices, both of which are key conduct concerns for the FSCA. So this is the last slide before I will hand over to you, Anita. In this section, we look at how frequently institutions communicate directly with their customers. But I think it's important to note that this refers to non-marketing material only, and we have specified that in the return as well. So we are not interested in promotional messages or advertisements, but rather that kind of engagements that supports ongoing customer relationships. So that would, for example, be policy updates, product information, service notifications. Here you are required to report the total number of customers who received these types of communications, and you need to then to break it down by frequency, so from more than once per month to less than once per year. To avoid double counting, customers should only be counted once, irrespective of the number of products that they have. And that's, like I said, it's to avoid double counting. So we focus on the customer and not on the product. So overall, this section will help us gauge how well you are maintaining really meaningful and balanced communication with your customers. Actually, I am at the end of my part of the presentation. I will be handing back to you and Juanita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorraine. Juanita, you may come through.
Thank you, Lorraine. Good afternoon, everyone. So my slide will go quite quick. And again, apologies for everyone that have seen it before. So the first is to understand the Omni risk return consultation process. And I actually think most of you already know this by heart. We published all the documents that you can find on our website, like I truly said in the beginning of the session. And then we're welcoming comments. The comments must be on the Microsoft template that we send out and must be submitted on the last day of November for it to be considered. We will not be considering any comments that come through the inbox that we made available or on a Word document or any other form for that matter, only the ones on the Microsoft template. Reason for that being, we're working against very tight timelines. It makes it easier to consolidate the feedback. It makes it easier to analyze it and see what we need to do with it, and even go back if anything is unclear. There was a question in one of the previous sessions, what happens if everyone decides at the last moment to submit their comments and you have system issues? Then you can mail the inbox and let us know of that, or you can send an email to Akashan. He is our technical expert, together with Lorraine de Swart, and they will assist you to submit your comments in time. But I would like to ask that after these workshops, you really give it a lot of thought and try and submit your comments not at the last moment on the last day. Then in December and January, we'll be working through these comments. And this is after we had these workshops. Like you know, we are now in the second workshop for round 2. The last one will be on Monday, the 17th of November. All the workshop is published on our social media and the presentations is on our website available for ease of reference and to assist with the comments that you have. When we look at the overall IRS implementation plan, the IRS project is probably the biggest project that the FSCA has done. This is our soup tech solution that we're going to use. Therefore, it has come across few years of implementation and it is still going on. Now, in phase 1 of this integrated regulatory system or solution, we had the existing returns, which we built onto the system, and that would be your financials that Marie referred to. The insurers have the CBRs and those type of reportings. That was tested, and now we're in phase 2. In phase 2, we're looking at the returns of phase 1, seeing how we can possibly consolidate some of those returns, streamline them to make it easier for submission. We are also building the risk return and the risk model, where all of these different moving parts have to feed in so that it can look at your entity, your clients, your activities, be ready for future builds and give us a risk rating based on that. So we already did some testing and we're going into our second round of testing on the return and the model next week to try and finalize all our testing by the end of the year. Then it will be the industry pilot. And as Marilee said, we really want participation from all sectors, big and small, to tell us what if there's anything that could be an obstacle in submitting the return, if there's anything not working in the return, maybe some system issues when it comes to the submission of the return. Currently, the return will be submitted either via XML, which is more for the bigger entities, or you can do it through the portal on our website. You will be allowed to fill in the return, save it, come back later, fill in the return, save it until you're ready to submit it. And there will be a declaration that needs to be completed by senior management or a member of the governing body that confirms the accuracy of the data and that this is, to the best of their knowledge, a truthful submission. That shows you how important this return is for us and how important it is for us to also do our supervisory planning around it. Now, on this slide, it does show that the industry pilot will finish around about the end of August next year. This, however, does not mean your first submission of the return will be at the end of next year. There's a lot of other moving parts. We still have phase 3 of the development of the system that we're busy with. That is the licensing and the supervisory part. That is where all applications, notifications that you're currently doing is also being built on the system and also needs to be tested and activated. And this system needs to be completely ready to go live before any submissions can be done. It does not help us if you complete any returns and the system is not done, because then the whole automated process and trying to be more proactive when it comes to supervising the entities will fail, because we need the system for that. So we just want to be clear on that. But the pilot is planned to be done and dusted by the end of August, and then we would have at least known what are the obstacles in submitting the information. So this is an overview of where we are and what we're thinking about, and we're really welcoming your comments. And I can see we have a lot of questions in the Q&A. I'm struggling to stay ahead of them. So we're looking forward to the discussion after the slides. And please, you're welcome to send all comments to us on how we could improve any part of the return, and to get clarity on what you need to answer and not answer. Thank you. Tuli, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Juanita. We sound like those news people. Over to you, Atile. Well, thank you. Thanks, Juanita. We will now be moving into the Q&A session. In this segment, this is your space to engage with the team and ask questions about sections 5 to 8. So we'll take the questions in batches. First, we'll take 3 hands that are raised. If you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand function and we'll enable your mic, right? After those are answered, we'll then move to 3 questions from the Q&A section. I do ask that people raise their hand and speak to us. I really do encourage you. I would love for you to ask your question directly. We do want this to be a dialogue and not just a presentation. Your inputs are important. I will start with I already have 3 people with their hands up. Seems like today is going to be fiery. We will take as many questions as time allows until 3 p.m. hits. Okay, we'll start with Erica. Erica, please come through.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you for a great session. I think I stopped breathing when I listened to some of this because I'm thinking, oh, my word. But so I know there's a big issue with authorized users and where we sit, and we're not categorized from a licensing. And I know there's the new licensing requirements. The reality is that the majority of the largest authorized users are also FSPs. And as authorized users, first of all, we are defined as accountable institutions. So there's confusion about that, how we report and do we report. There's also confusion about when we license and when we don't license, because that's still a process, and when do we start getting involved. So if I could put it differently, if I start looking at from section 5, if I'm an accountable institution, and sorry, I'm not meaning to pick on anyone, but I am a bank that has a 2 or 3 different FSPs. In that FSPs, I've also got a broking, an authorized user. As an authorized user, I trade local clients and, well, I trade for clients, both local and foreign. But let's say I've got retail and institutional clients. Then my question is, I trade on exchanges, local exchanges, but I also trade foreign exchanges. I trade foreign products. Now, as that authorized user, because I have different FSP licenses, because I'm trading on products that are not just exchange products, but it's under the authorized user's license. What am I supposed to be doing here? And so I'm really confused about, even from, and I know we're talking about it, the licensing part, but what is, and I'll just pick on, sorry, Standard Bank, who has FSP license, trades local, trades foreign, trades retail, trades institutional. Some we've got assets under management, some assets are under my exchange license, some assets are under my FSP license. It's just, there's no definition. And so even if you're trying to report as the non-exchange license, but still authorized user, well, how do then I split those assets and split that up? There's just, and it goes from the reporting to the number of trades to the value of trades. If I just look at the non-retail space or non-control clients, as in the big institutions, when I'm trading for a big institution, they trade in bulk, and they are my client, but they've got underlying clients, and they might trade 300 or 400 allocations to one trade. I'm just not sure from a broker's perspective, or when I talk about broker, talk about authorized user, how we fit into this bucket. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Erica. Colleagues, I'm going to ask that we do one question at a time, that you guys answer. I would appreciate if you could answer Erica, just so we can move from Erica to MJ, and you don't have to keep taking notes of what the question is and you remember. Is that better? I know, Lorraine, you prefer that. Let's do that. Please respond.
Thank you. And I'm happy for my colleagues in the markets team to come in as well. I'll give it a first stab, and if they could come in. So firstly, this return will be applicable to financial institutions, so entities that are currently being licensed by the FSCA. Authorized users are being supervised by the exchanges itself. So technically, they will not be required to complete this return. I know under COVID things might change, so I haven't applied my mind yet. So Erica, this is actually quite a good question that you've raised. So if you could obviously include it as part of your comments on the return. As regards to what you have to report on, I get feedback. As to what you have to report on.
Apologies for that, Lorraine. I've muted Erica.
Okay, thank you. So yes, so if you're an authorized user, but you're also an FSP, so for purposes of your license authorization as an FSP, you will be required to submit a return, because for those activities, you are not supervised by the exchange, and therefore the requirement that you must have a license, and then therefore the requirement that you must report. So technically, you will have to report only in respect of those transactions or activities that falls within your FSP license, and not also those that are form part of your authorized user activities that are being supervised by the exchanges. So that may bring in some technicalities and difficult and challenges for institutions, because now you'll have to split. But please raise that as a concern in your comments to us, and let's consider how we can resolve some of those challenges. And if you have any suggestions as to how we can resolve, please include those as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. So if I could just, I don't know, maybe my colleagues in the markets team would like to come in as well. I don't know if they're on. Is Odette online? Srilin?
It is online.
I see Mpu's hand. Maybe if he might want to add as well. Thank you.
Mpu, you can unmute.
Yes, I think you answered the question correctly, Lorraine. The first phase was intended.
Mpu, your line is cutting. I'm not sure if it's just me. Lorraine, can you hear Mpu? Apologies,
Okay, let
Nicole,
me
we can't hear you.
try
Your line is
again.
breaking.
I see
I think
Odette is
we've
also
lost.
online, Atuli. Maybe we can unmute her if she wants to come in. Maybe her connection is a bit better.
Okay, Akasham, please enable her mic. I hope we can hear her better. Oh, you're still breaking. The line is really bad. We can't hear you. Not at all. Akashan, have you enabled Odette's mic?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I am unable to unmute. I lost a bit of the question. Can I please ask if Erica wouldn't mind just repeating it? Sorry, I got cut off for a moment. I just want to get the question again, if that's possible.
Sure, thanks. So our question is more goes around authorized users who are accountable institutions and who aren't included right now because we are regulated elsewhere. However, the majority of the authorized users have FSP licenses. So some of the activities from trading on non-exchange products, let's say offshore products or other retail products, how are they going to report? One, because number one, I know it's all got to do with licensing. If I haven't licensed my authorized user, but some of the activities are under the authorized user but have multiple different licenses, how do you split those licenses? Who does what? And how do you even begin to split those activities? So trading, I'm just going to say on the JSE, and trading offshore for equities. Trading for a retail client compared to trading for an institutional client. There's very different mechanisms of reporting and different mechanisms. Sometimes I receive cash from retail clients, but I don't receive cash from non-control clients, big institutional clients. So we're not quite sure from FAB all the way to the end how you're going to report on trading activities, if I have to split them, monies received, if I have to split them for some under the it's all under authorized user, but there's an additional license within that. So what we're asking brokers to do or authorized users to do is carve out some of their activities that's under their authorized user license and report. And that is exceptionally technical and exceptionally, I'm not quite sure how that's even possible because they're carving it out of their authorized user license. And so there's this gap because we as authorized users haven't been defined, where our licensing hasn't been defined yet, but some of the activities under those licenses are under the accountable institution and FSP license. There could be some really big issues within the market.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Erica, and I don't think the intention was to have the reporting be onerous or duplicative. And I think a lot of this will also be ironed out when COFI comes into effect, because as you know, we will then the authorized users and the CSTPs will have to be authorized under COFI before you can even become an exchange member. So I think, and for us, the current requirements, as I understand them, won't apply to authorized users for our purposes under the markets activities. I think that will be dealt with separately, possibly under IRS. I'm not sure, but I think as it currently stands, those requirements will not apply to the authorized users. I don't know if I answered your question.
The issue is that I have a different FSP license to trade other products under my authorized user. So they're still going to have to report, but so they're going to have to carve out. So if I'm under, let's say, a bank as an authorized user, some of those activities that I do and I'm trading, although it's under my authorized user license, I have another license to do other things in that environment. So you're actually saying to the authorized user, for your authorized on exchange transactions, you don't have to report. But for anything that's not on the exchange, that's the SRO right now. So when you're trading in offshore markets, when you may be buying unit trusts or whatever that is, but it's still under my authorized user entity, you're saying we must report. So what you're actually telling that person to do, that authorized user, is to now split the activities and do partial reporting on partial things. And that in itself is exceptionally complex. And so I think what we have to try and be careful of, even in licensing, is understanding that your main authorized users have multiple licenses, and we shouldn't be leaving them on the outside and doing all these FSPs and leaving them on the outside, because somewhere they're going to have to plug in and it's just not going to work. So we actually need to sit down and speak to those people to try and define that properly upfront.
Okay.
Thank you, Erica.
Sorry. Yes, you can go ahead, Tuli. Sorry.
No problem. You can proceed, Odette. I also see Lorraine has her hand up, so I'm sure she would like to also take a step.
No, she can proceed. Thanks. Fine.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Erika, like I said before, because they have an FSP license, and remember the activities that they are performing in terms of that license is not regulated or supervised as part of their status as an authorized user by the exchange, they will be required to report on those activities in terms of this return. But we recognize the complexity in splitting the activities, and we also recognize the fact that where you have multiple licenses, it might bring some additional complexities. But what we have said before is, because we are now risk rating and looking at the risk profile of an entity holistically, entities will be required to report on in respect of all of their activities in one return. Okay, so but hopefully under COFI, or well, rather under COFI, that complexity will be resolved to some extent, because as Odette mentioned as well, the authorized users will become financial institutions, that they will become licensed entities, and the moment they become a licensed entity, this return will have to be completed in respect of all of the activities. Then no splitting it will be required. But please highlight those concerns and practicalities, and please provide some suggested changes. Hopefully COFI comes into effect before the return becomes due. But let's see what, if it doesn't in the interim, what measures can be put in place to accommodate your sector. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Erica. MJ, I'm going to ask that you come through. Welcome back, MJ.
Thank you so much, Tuli. Nice to be back. And guys, thank you to Erica's point for allowing us to ask all of our questions and to get some clarity. Before I ask the question, Tuli, just to maybe add on to what Erica's saying, I think the one thing we must just safeguard, colleagues, and respectfully so, is that we don't expect regulated entities to change their operating models by splitting out systems and building additional systems which are hugely costly if you want only certain parts to report on certain aspects, because we're going to cause an IT risk. That's the reality. We're going to cause a systemic risk here. So that's very concerning if that's the route towards which we are moving. So just maybe a caution against that, to the extent that we are able to avoid that, that would be greatly appreciated. And we mustn't forget that costs somewhere need to go to. And the only place where it can go to is to a customer. Okay, getting to my question. So Michelle, thank you so much. I see you have responded, because my first question was, can you please confirm that banks will not be expected to complete any of the anti-financial crime related questions? So we have done a very thorough analysis of what we are being asked under the risk return from a PA perspective. And I think our request in this regard is, if you can maybe have a look at what they are asking and to the extent able actually align with that so that we can show that collaboration and cooperation between our regulators and supervisors. I think that's the one thing, but also to alleviate the extreme burden that could potentially be placed on institutions that have to do this reporting. And I just want to raise one example specifically, which I would really appreciate some guidance on. So the whole matter around border and metro transactions. So to report within 100 kilometers of a border, if somebody can please explain to me how that must be done. Because you sit with practical situations as follows. You've got a customer, he is traveling about because he's perhaps a salesperson, and he decides to do some bank transactions on his laptop. We will not know whether that transaction is done within a 100-kilometer radius of a border or not. He could travel into Swaziland, be there for 5 minutes, literally go across the border, come back and be in South Africa again. Okay. So I think the question here is we are not quite clear on what the border aspect and how the border aspect is going to assist in managing and mitigating anti-financial crime risks. And I think considering what FATF is already doing under recommendation 16 and the fact that we are going to implement the controls or actually enhance our existing controls to make sure all of us comply with that, I think it would be better if we maybe look at what we already have and what we can already use to actually monitor and supervise this risk. And there the PA can really assist. So it may be worthwhile just having some engagements with them. And then just something else that we have to consider in respect of this aspect specifically. We mustn't forget that we all have a constitutional right to the privacy and freedom of movement. Okay. We don't ask customers to give us consent to track their movements. Yeah, perhaps on certain products for very specific reasons, but that's not something that's generically obtained. Additionally, we've got POPOIA, which we know the privacy legislation is very, very strict around what you can get, why you should get it, how long you can keep it, when you must delete it, etc. So the radius calculations itself will also be extremely difficult to implement. And like I said, it's impractical because you can have a further situation. So now you've got the situation of a customer doing his bank transactions on his laptop. Then you can have a customer who applies a security feature like Bitdefender or something like that. They can set that it looks as if they are in the UK, but they're doing a transaction in South Africa. So I think that aspect, if we could just please get some bit more understanding on how it's seen that this actually be implemented practically in a cost-efficient manner, given that we have seen in our previous mutual evaluation that the banking sector especially has, mitigated this risk quite sufficiently. There weren't any findings raised as it relates anti-financial crime. So that's the first question. And then my second question, last question, when we look at 5.1, assets held, managed on or behalf of customers, what exactly do we mean with assets? Guys, will really appreciate just some guidance there, perhaps a definition around assets. Again, because there's practicalities that we have to think about. So let me give you an example. When you buy a car on a loan from a bank, the car's not registered in the customer's name. So the e-nature certificate's in the bank's name. Is that now an asset or not? If it's an asset, how am I supposed to know the value of that asset? How am I supposed to know whether the customer was perhaps in an accident and he decided, notwithstanding having insurance, he's not going to fix his car, which affected the value of the asset? So those are some practical things that we need to take into consideration. And then a last example, So does an asset include a claim that has perhaps been initiated under a policy, but it hasn't yet been paid to a beneficiary? Is that an asset or is it not an asset? So there's these practicalities that we deal with on a daily basis, and if we can just get some guidance on how to deal with those and address those. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you very much, MJ. I see Lorraine, your hand is up, as well as Michelle. Please come through, colleagues.
Thank you. So if I can just take the first point raised by Marguerite, and then I'll hand over to Michelle to address the AML, CFT concerns. So Marguerite, yes, we fully agree with you. The intention is not to make it more difficult for industry to report or require them to set up different systems and different processes to enable them to report. And I think that's why we are moving to a single risk return that has to be completed by an entity, even where that entity has multiple licenses across the different sectors. So we're not going to require an entity that has multiple licenses to report per license. So we look at holistic reporting. So perhaps just to mention that. On the authorized users, I think there are special circumstances around running the authorized users, and also because the activities that they conduct have different oversight mechanisms in place. But like I mentioned, that is for now it's an interim challenge. And under COVID, that will all be resolved as they will become financial institutions as well. So the intention is not to create or make it more difficult or even to create duplicate reporting. Thank you, Atili. I'll hand over to Michelle then.
Thank you, Lorraine and Atili. Afternoon, everyone. MJ, yes, I think a portion of what you are referring to is compliance burden, duplication efforts, and the like. So we actually had a discussion with the PA. This week we have quarterly meetings with them on an operational basis for AML CFT purposes specifically. And we explained, we brought them up to speed in terms of the IRS, the Omni return engagements we have with you guys. We are aware that they also have certain returns, and we are going to do our best to work together to see that there really are no duplications. We know that it's very difficult to respond to PA and sometimes to FIC and then to us. So we are sensitive to that, and we will pay attention. The questions around the border, and this actually came up in the previous round as well. I think what we try to get across is that domestically, there are different geographic risks as well. There's not just a distinction between local and foreign geographic risks. And it's common knowledge that closer to a border, bigger metropolitan areas, the risks may potentially increase. What we try to steer away from is to say in the question, use words like close to a border, because then you would ask us the same thing. You know, what is close to a border? Define close to. What we're trying to, in principle, we want you to still use a risk-based approach. The concept of the closer to the border, the higher the risk would be. And to the extent where possible that you do know where the transaction takes place, that you take that concept of closer to the border within a fair kilometer range, to then respond on that basis. So it's not an absolute, we want you to go measure it. Definitely, you bring up good points. These sessions are quite valuable in saying, well, maybe the person is driving in their car quickly across the border, or you don't necessarily always would know. Please include that in your responses. I think together with the previous round, we also got interesting feedback to say, what do we even mean by a border? Because the ocean is also a border. So we have to find a way to not let this come across too literal, but to apply a risk-based approach and to have the consciousness that closer to border would mean, or proximity to border has an impact on the risk. But help us if you have better ways that we can phrase this possibly. We are very open to it, but we still believe that getting that geographic risk element into the overall picture would be important. Take your point on freedom of movement and POPIA. Again, I think there's probably valid limitations. There's also validly valid requirements of information that you should have about your client. So if your client normally resides or works close to a border or metropolitan area, those are things that you can consider, and it's things that you would know about the client in any case as part of your CDD. But your points are valid, and we're making notes, and we look forward to how you also make suggestions how we can improve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle and Lorraine. MJ, I hope that provides with clarity. Ryan, thank you for your
Helpful.
patience. Please
Thanks.
come through. Ryan, are you still there? Can anyone hear Ryan? Because I'm not hearing anything on my side.
I see he
Nothing.
says in the chat that he is here, Atuli. I think it's Rian. Oh, no, it's Ryan. But the chat answered Rian.
Yes, that's why. Is it the same person? Because there's a Ryan and a Rian. I'm guessing it's the same person. Ryan, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. Do you mind exiting and coming back? And then just put your hand up again so we can enable your mic. Or should we unmute Rian if it's the same person? Okay, Juanita, I think let's take one question from the chat so long while we wait for Ryan or Rian to sort out the mic issue.
Thank you, Atuli. So there's a question from Candy Rum. She's asking, we are a small FSP that is working on business-to-business basis as a distribution channel to introduce our UK sister companies' financial services to regulated independent financial advisors and life companies. Since we do not handle client assets or have any customers, how will we handle Section 5 and 6? So I did answer quite a few questions, especially relating to Section 5, in relation to if you do not, if you're a Cat 1 FSP and you don't deal with any assets, we said if anything is not applicable to you, it's you will complete it with a 0 because it does have an influence on your risk rating. It tells us something about your risk and about your activities. And if you believe a question shouldn't be applicable to you, it might not be grayed out now because there is no functionality in the return, as Marilee indicated earlier. Lorraine, however, because this was a different type of question saying that they're just a distribution channel to their UK sister, giving these services to independent financial advisors and life companies, will they then answer a 0 for the entire Section 5 and 6? Because I would think there is some transactions that still take place, so I'm not so sure about Section 6. Thanks.
Yeah, so it's difficult to respond to this question without having more context. Because if they are acting as a distributor, so they're acting as an intermediary, and it's only service agreements, I need to understand a little bit more. So they are providing my understanding is it seems that they are providing financial services. So it's either advice or they're rendering an intermediary service. But what that entails, what the products is, and who the customer is, there should be a customer. I don't see how they can't be a customer. But maybe this is something that we can take offline, because you can't provide a financial service in the absence of a customer or the absence of a product provider. So maybe we can take this offline to get more context, but it's without that context, it will not be possible to respond here.
Okay, perfect. I wasn't sure, so I'm glad that we're on the same page. Candy, you're welcome to send us more information, maybe on an email to the inbox, and then we can guide you better on that one. Atuli, do you want me to try another question, or are we going to give Ryan a chance? I see he is back and his hand is up.
Ryan, please speak. Let's see if we can hear you this time.
Hi guys, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you. You're Ryan, right? Not Ria.
No, it's Ryan. Thank you for your time, guys. There was more to do.
Sound a bit low, Ryan. Do you mind just speaking more into the mic?
Can you hear me better now?
A bit better, yeah.
No. My question is more around mainly section 5, and I think other people also have the question. It's a bit confusing. I don't know if you guys could provide more guidance about what you mean by like assets, and then I see collection of money. So like if someone's just a Cat 1 FSP and they just do advised intermediary services, and they're not collecting premiums or anything, is that section 5.1? I'm assuming then it's not applicable to them. But then also 5.2, then it's not their products they're selling like insurance products. So I don't know if because sometimes you guys use the word like your insurance product or your product. So when you say like your, are you referring then to like insurers, product providers, underwriters, and not just like a brokerage? That's just, like an independent brokerage. They're just selling different insurance products. Like they're not collecting assets. There's no allocation of assets or anything like that. They have contracts with insurers. They sell the insurance products. Most of them don't collect premiums. The premiums get paid from the client directly to the insurer. So I don't know if more guidance can maybe be given on that that section specifically, just so people don't answer stuff incorrectly and like maybe raise red flags or stuff like that. And I think I don't know who it was said that maybe closer to the time for the smaller FSPs, you guys would give more guidance to the smaller ones, of maybe someone, if they're completing it, they don't understand, people they could reach out to if they have questions and stuff, which I think would help the smaller FSPs, because they might struggle to understand what they need to do.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Colleagues, can you just confirm that you heard Ryan? A thumbs up. Anyone? Okay. As long as you heard. Lorraine, please come through.
Thank you. So yes, we take the point that some further clarity may be required insofar it relates to what we mean by assets. But assets held is basically money or financial products that you are currently holding on behalf of a customer. So that's an example of that would be an asset manager. An asset manager may hold or manage customer assets. So that is the context in which that's the context of section 5.1. The 5.2 that deals with the collection of money, and here we specifically use the word money, and that's where you actually collect money on behalf. Well, we don't even say on behalf, but that's where you collect money or receive money on behalf from a customer. So that is where you collect premium or any other types of monies that you've received from the customer, and that you either receive directly or that you pay over to a financial service, a product supplier. So that's the distinction between the two. The one, it's where you hold and manage, and the other one, which is wider than just money, but it includes money. And the second part is where you actually receive and collect and then pay over. I hope that helps a bit. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Ryan, hope you sorted.
Thank you.
Anita, can you please come through? You can ask more questions from the Q&A section.
Yes, thank you, Atuli. So the next question, there's Juanita also asking a lot of questions on the Q&A. It seems we always talk a lot. The next question would be, I'm glad that I'm not the only one, is on
I was about to
questions.
say, it's a Juanita thing.
Yeah. 7.1, the option F1 that deals with cancel trades. When we ask about product and financial service agreement terminations and trade cancellations, if the category there is trades during the reporting period, categorized as follows, and then the first option is cancel trades, and then we have suspended trades and rejected/failed trades. That's how we break it down. The question is the intention to report on trades under the asset side of trades in a CIS portfolio? I think we might need a little bit more here before we could answer this question. I don't know, Lorraine, can you answer it just based on that, or would you like Juanita to come in?
So some more context would be valuable, but maybe just to highlight that that question must only be completed by market infrastructure. Okay, so that would be, for an example, an exchange. CIS will not be required to complete that section.
Okay. Juanita, are you happy with that answer? Do you want to give more context? Question if you can see Juanita. I'm not sure how to pronounce the surname. Were. Yes, there's a hand. If you could please allow her mic.
Juanita, you can unmute. Your mic has been enabled.
And everyone, the clarity was good enough. It's sweet. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita. It's nice to hear your voice. Okay. Then, Atuli, I think I have one more question to go before we go back to the hands. This one is also from you, Anita. It's on 8.1. And it says that provide a definition for advertising, as Board Notice 92 has a definition for advertising and marketing separately. So there's a definite definition for each one of them separately. And the request is that we then provide a definition for advertising, as in 8.1, we only refer to the advertising channels. I think what I would like to say here, and then maybe if Lorraine wants to add to it, we must remember that for the purposes of this return, we do give certain descriptions to help guide you in how to answer for this return, and there's a specific need that we have and the risk rating we want to do based on the return. So here we have broken it down into certain advertising channels that we have. So it doesn't interfere with the definitions already given in Board Notice 92. It just asks you to identify the channels as we have them here. If any of those channels are not clear as to what we mean by it, then maybe in the comments, you can highlight, because there is another one under alternative channels that someone did highlight, that we might need to elaborate on or give a description for it to make it useful for the return. I don't know, Juanita, if that answers your question, or if you're still concerned about the definitions. But like I said, then you can just highlight it in your comments as well. But it wouldn't be in contradiction of Board Notice 92. It is only these channels that we have here.
Thank you so much, Anita.
Thank you. Thanks, Atuli.
Thank you very much to both Juanitas. Let's go to Bafana Ngwenya. Please come through.
Thank you so much, Atule, and good afternoon, everyone. I got out earlier that obviously the financial institutions' requirement for reporting will depend on the nature and extent of their risk. So in somewhat complicated self-captive structures where in some instances you find that a cell owner in that self-structure may have multiple UMAs, and in that ecosystem each UMA brings various types of brokerages for different classes of business, etc. Some may really be very low risk, light, but I mean, everyone is writing in that cell on classes of business that have been, authorized in terms of that cell captive insurer, right? How will that actually look like now if some then there'll be minimal reporting? Will then the cell captive insurer, also have to consider adding those figures on their own returns and submissions? Could that not possibly create duplications? How should that be managed? Just clarity on that, and maybe we'll put in a comment. We'll also add to the industry comments on this question, but we just need maybe a sense of how you've been thinking about those complicated structures and reporting.
Thanks, Bafana. Juanita, I know once your camera's on, you're ready.
Well, I'll take a first stab at it, and then Marley or Lorraine can come in. Currently, the cell captive insurers are reporting per cell on the insurance CBR, and then doing a consolidated return for their insurance license. And all of that needs to be submitted. So it wouldn't be different with the Omni risk return, because we're saying every legally licensed entity need to submit a return. No matter how many licenses you have to do a return for your entity on entity level, also not on group level, on entity level, and that's what you need to submit. So the UMAs that are licensed will be giving their own return, submitting their own return based on the business that they do, because it won't just be for you in most instances. Or in some instances, and the insurer will be doing a return based on their legal entity and the business that they are doing, which is also not necessarily just one license. It's different licenses, but it is one consolidated return on the business of the insurer. So I don't think that the method of reporting changes from what you have in the insurance CBRs to the Omni risk return. Not for the cell insurers that are currently reporting, and it's that one return per entity. So yes, it just makes it a bit easier for you because you don't do the consolidated one from all the cells. Your return on its own for your own business as an insurer should actually capture all of that. Thanks, Atuli.
Thank you. Bafana, you sorted?
Atuli?
Yeah, I think I'm sorted. Thanks. That's very helpful because it maintains that previous way of reporting. So it's much more clearer going forward. That will continue on that basis. Thanks, Juanita.
Perfect. Okay. Marali?
Sorry, Atuli, yes, I just wanted to add to that. So remember, the aim of this return again is to identify the risk for each entity reporting, right? So yes, the business that you are doing as a cell captive is probably also going to be reported by the cell captive insurer. I mean, as the cell owner, for example, is going to be reported by the cell captive insurer. But we are trying to determine your own risk, what is going on in your business specifically. And eventually, and that's a journey that we walk with the insurers as well, as this is a document. It may not seem like it at this point, but the idea is, and it may still need refinement from our side as well, there's many questions, but that you can use this to manage your business and to already identify certain things that pop up early on. So we actually don't just want it to be a compliance check that you do because the regulator is asking for it. We want you to receive benefit from it, even though it may not look like it at this point. But again, we're all working towards that, even if it does take some time. Thanks.
Thank you, Marali. MJ, please come through.
I think Erica was before me, Julie. So I don't know whether you
Oh,
want to give a
apologies.
yep.
Erica,
No,
yes. Let's start with
Don't worry,
Erica.
carry on. I'll go after you. I'm happy. We're not going anywhere in a hurry.
thanks,
Okay,
Erica.
MJ can
Appreciate it.
start, then we'll go to Erica.
Okay, thanks, Tilly. So Tilly, apologies. We forgot to answer the one question I had, and Ryan reminded me of that. Lorraine, if you can just help me to understand. So assets, the example that I gave about a car that is still registered in the bank's name until the loan have been paid off, is that a asset? Yes or no? A gift card where we, for example, underwrite, support shopping centers that issue and sell gift cards. Is a gift card an asset if it hasn't yet been used or not? If an insurance claim has been initiated but it hasn't been paid as yet to the beneficiary, is it the asset? Yes or no? So just those practicalities, just some help there, please, ladies. And then my second, and Tulia, I'm sure you're going to be glad about this, last question, actually more of a request perhaps, Lorraine, on the unclaimed assets as well. Colleagues, if we can just please guard around expecting regulated entities to enhance, amend, or build new systems based on definitions for the purposes of a return, which is then going to change after the actual legislative framework consultation process that's currently underway has been finalized. Because there again, it's costs. Those costs need to go somewhere. Somebody needs to pay for it. If you use the definition, there's very specific data streams that you get data from. So if that definition changes, it can cause that you have to change not only one system, but lots of interfaces to different systems. So that's just a plea on the unclaimed assets. Perhaps we can look at that rather as a phase 2 once the legislative framework has been completely finalized. Thanks, Julie. Asset question, just outstanding. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marguerite. Lorraine, your camera was on. I'm pretty sure you wanted to take a step, as per usual.
Yeah, thank you, Italy. So as regards assets, so the intention really was to capture those assets that you hold on behalf of the customer. So that would be your financial products, your any type of financial product, any monies, etc. So some of the examples you provided, there's some legal technicalities around it. So let us consider included in your response, and we will come back to you. But the intention was really to see what assets are you managing on behalf of customers and which assets are you holding. It's not really to include some of the things that you've referred to, but I get the point that it might be necessary for us to clarify further, but please provide those specific examples as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Erica. I haven't forgotten about you. So your hand is down, though.
Oh, sorry, no problem. Thank you. I think it goes automatically after I unmute my camera, but all good. So I'm a little bit confused and maybe I didn't understand. There was a question about reporting, and I think Lorraine or someone said the FMI, which was in this instance the exchange, would report. So now I'm confused. What are we asking the exchanges to report on behalf of authorized users or not? And then the other thing was tying into that, I think it was a gentleman before who spoke about whether it was entity level or license level, and it was entity level. So again, then I'm going to go back to my understanding was it was license. So if I'm entity authorized user, I don't have to report unless I've got a license that is. So is it the entity or is it the license? But my first question is, what was the comments around the FMI having to report transactions? So I missed that that understanding. Sorry.
Thanks, Erica. All right.
So I'll come in and then my colleagues in the markets team can augment or correct. So Erica, yes. So the questions that we've referred to, there are certain questions in the return that are only relevant to market infrastructures. So only a market infrastructure is required to complete it. And then obviously there are some questions that do not specifically apply to a market infrastructure. So we will be requiring a market infrastructure to complete a return or this return, barring certain questions. The infrastructure is not required to complete. So, for example, an exchange will not necessarily be required to complete the information or the return based on information obtained or based on the activities of the authorized users. That's not the intention. So I hope that clarifies. Otherwise, we can also take it offline. But maybe Odette or Mpo would like to come in here as well.
I think we might need to take it offline because I'm not quite sure what they do. Is it funds received, which are actually the brokers that go to trust? Is it assets under management, which is the brokers, which already, if I think about that authorized user who has assets both for what the exchange does and other assets for the same client. So it's the distinction of, again, now we're splitting because the exchange is an agent on behalf of the members and only of a portion of the members' activities. So, and if the cash is sitting in trustees, some cash is, let's say, sitting in money market or in a product that's not regulated by them, then what? What would they look at as failed trade and not? So it again, we haven't made this distinction about this orphan child, the authorized user who split, and then what is the role and who's responsible for what. So I think we might need to take it offline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that would be helpful to get a better understanding. But for purposes of the return and the format it's now, authorized users are not required to complete unless they have a phase license. So then just perhaps to address her second part of her question relating to who should be reporting. So firstly, if you have a license, so if you are a financial institution, but you have multiple licenses. So for example, let's take a bank. A bank may have a phase license. They might be supervised under the banking conduct standard, and then they may also have an ODP license. What we are saying is that that bank, so the fact that it has more than one license, only have to complete one return. So it's not a return per license, but per entity. I hope that clarifies. Thank you.
No, because now I'm even a little more confused. So let's just take again a bank, and I'm going to stick to Standard Bank, who has phase license, who has the banking license, phase license, ODP license, and then they've got entity stockbroker. So are we telling them to ignore their stockbroker, who in that stockbroker may also have some products that fall outside of the exchange? That's the confusion.
So the stockbroker is not is a separate legal entity.
Yes.
Yes.
But
so
some of the reporting is rolled in.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep them totally separate.
Yes, because the stockbroker is a separate legal entity. It's not part of the legal entity that's reporting and that has the multiple licenses.
Okay, even though it's 100% owned by the bank.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So we look at legal entity.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Thank you, Erica. Juanita, let's do one question from the Q&A, and then I think we'll be safe to wrap up on time.
Thank you. I think actually we've been really good with the questions in the Q&A this time around. There is one that still needs to be answered, but I also think we need a little bit of background to it. That's why I didn't answer it at this point. It's again from Juanita. Akashan, if you can enable her mic. And it's in relating to question 8.1D, where we're talking about alternative channels, alternative advertising channels. And she is saying that we have the option of white labeling / co-naming arrangements as one of these channels there as an option, but that this is not an advertising channel. It is the appointment of the manager. Or she's asking, is it an appointment of the manager? But I couldn't really understand the context of the question or exactly what is meant, because we're referring to white labeling here as an alternative advertising channel. So Unita, if you could maybe just give us some background, then we can answer that question, and then we did well in answering the questions in the Q&A.
Juanita, your mic has already been enabled, so please unmute. Juanita, can you hear us? Okay, she just dropped off. Let's just give her a minute to come in again. Usually happens when someone is struggling with their mic. Let's just give her 1 minute.
Heidi, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I had to transfer to my phone because somehow I was disconnected. It's just on the white labeling and co-naming, because normally there is what our managers in the collective investment space, it's we refer to as managers and not a marketing space or option. So just clarity on that.
Okay, so are you saying that you have white labeling agreements in the
Yes.
CIA space, but you don't see that as an alternative type of marketing? You see that as the appointing of a manager?
Yes. So in the collective investment space, that would be appointing of a manager. So whether the old name is white labeling or now co-naming. So that is not marketing. It's not seen as marketing unless you have a different view.
Okay, I think we do have a different view, but I am going to ask my CIS colleague Zulani or Annalise if they want to come in.
Okay.
And whether they want to give any clarity on it. But remember, even that managers that you appoint in terms of these contracts, while Akashan is looking for their mics, and they can correct me if I'm wrong. But even in terms of that agreement of appointing that manager, and it is like we know it in the old days, giving away my age here, as white labeling, they are still using your products and still advertising in a way. It will still be an alternative channel for advertising because they are using the product, selling the concept, acting on your behalf, even if they're appointed as a manager. If you wouldn't want to put them in there, where would you put them? I think that would be more the question. If you don't see that as an advertising channel, because that is still an agreement that you have with them, and they can still go and get more clients for you, then what would you see that? Because you'll see that alternative channels that we have, that whole section there, about partnerships and sponsorships, that's totally different from a normal radio or television advertising. And that's why we thought it would fit into that one. Otherwise, you would put it, I suppose, under other. Now I'm interrupting myself and answering the question to you. Put it under other and explain, but I wouldn't understand why you wouldn't be comfortable with putting it in under white labeling.
Okay, it's just we've not looked at it that it's would fit into that category.
Okay, I see Lorraine came on, her camera's on, so maybe I am incorrect in my understanding. Let's see, Lorraine.
No, it's an interesting point. I also don't have the answer. So please raise it in the comments.
Okay.
So are you saying that it's more a distribution channel than a marketing channel? Is that
Yeah, we could probably put it more into distribution than marketing.
all right? Please raise it. Like I said, I don't have a I don't have
Okay.
an answer, and we'll definitely engage with our colleagues, our supervisory colleagues. But
Okay.
we'll
Good.
definitely give some attention to it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you very much, colleagues. And that brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you again for showing up and asking thoughtful questions. Your engagement ensures that this Omni risk return is not just a regulatory requirement, but a tool that's informed by real experiences and aligned with the industry's needs. A kind reminder that recordings of the first round of the workshops are available on the FSCA YouTube channel. This round of workshops will be available on our YouTube after our last session, which is on Monday. So please share these videos with your colleagues who couldn't attend. This is very important. And we hope to see many of you at our final workshop on Monday, where we'll explore sections 9 to 12. Have a great day. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Have a good
Bye.
day. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.